Hello, happy Tuesday. We're going to do the review for last Thursday's mystery grape, Clare Valley Riesling, and some of the clues that can lead you to it in blind tasting. As I mentioned in the text recap, this is a grape this is a wine that shows up quite a bit. Riesling is a very popular wine to do as a grape flight because you can get three very distinctive Rieslings from different regions. And Clare Valley, there's also Eden Valley, of course, but Clare Valley is kind of a big benchmark there for that style. And then it's also one that pops up in the mixed bag flight with, it could be anything in that flight. But because of this style being so distinctive on it, examiners like featuring it quite a bit. So if it's one that is not familiar to you, definitely recommend seeking them out. In my post, I recommended some good producers to find. I know in the U.S. it's not the easiest to find. A lot of Australian wines beyond the Penfolds, Molly Duker, and Yellowtail, it's kind of, you have to search a little bit for it, but it's worth the search on it. But let's look at the clues here from Thursday's game. Clue 1, lime. Clue 2, green apple. Clue 3, white peach. Clue 4, passion fruit. And I know this one kind of threw a few folks in the loop because I was looking for kind of a tropical note, because a really big distinctive thing with Clare Valley Riesling is it kind of has what I call the kind of a rectangle of fruit approach. It hits so many different clusters. You've got the citrus, you've got the tree fruit, you've got the stone fruit, and then you've got a tropical element. And so I was looking for things that kind of convey that tropical element. At Guildsom, they have a really, really good blind tasting guide for all the different grape varieties, and they included guava and passion fruit. Guava doesn't resonate for me with this. When I was looking at my blind tasting notes for Clare Valley Rieslings that I did for my studies, several of them I wrote kind of vaguely New Zealand Sauv Blanc-like. So that's why passion fruit resonated for me on that. But when I talk about that rectangle, you want to think about that in that context of, you have your long sides and then you have your short sides. So the long sides are going to be the citrus and the stone fruit. That's the big, big notes that jump out. Those shorter sides that kind of complement the fruit are those tree fruits and that vaguely tropical. So it's not going to scream passion fruit, tropical like a New Zealand Sauv Blanc, but it's kind of on the sides there. The screaming notes, those long sides of your rectangle, are the citrus and the stone fruits on that. So that's a kind of my mental approach when I think about the Clare Valley Riesling, as I look for that rectangle of that 4 different clusters of fruit. Continue with the clues. Clue 5, linden blossom. Basically any kind of white floral note. This is really typical of Riesling. It's not as overwhelmingly floral as a Gewürztraminer or Muscat or Viognier could be, but Riesling does have its floral notes on it, especially when there's cooling influences involved, which we'll hit on more. And then clue 6 was kind of the gimme clue, especially for folks that have seen the show, the movie Somme with that. The fresh tennis balls. Some folks describe this as new shoes or cut garden hose. For me, I'm not a big tennis person, so racquetballs, like fresh racquetballs, it's kind of a vaguely chemical, plasticky scent that just pops out, and when you smell it, you know it. I mean, you can kind of get that in a lot of Rieslings. And so what it is it's tied to the TDN, and I'm not going to try to say the full name of that compound. You just Google TDN wine and you'll find it easily. A lot of people associate that note with petrol, that you can see, especially aged German Rieslings, but there's a lot of different ways that note can pop up to different people. It's kind of the cilantro of wine notes. Some people absolutely love it, some people absolutely hate it, and people have different levels of sensitivity to it. So the interesting thing about TDN, it was very, very well associated with Clare Valley Rieslings on there. And as we've learned more about what brings it out, producers now have options if they want it to accentuate it or if they want to downplay it. So some of the things that causes TDN to be very prevalent in wine is water stress and then direct sun exposure on the clusters on that. So you think this is, Clare Valley, this is a very warm climate. We've got, it's very low latitude. I mean, it's the same distance from the equator as Beirut, Lebanon, and Los Angeles on that. So you can kind of picture that there. So a lot of light intensity, warm continental climate. So there's heat there. And it's not, it's pretty dry. There's not a lot of rain. I mean, during the growing season, about 250 millimeters of rain. So water stress can be an issue. You can offset that a bit with irrigation. Though we do know, water, drought, and conservation, that's a big thing, especially in Australia. But that is an option. And then you think about that sun exposure, canopy management. And so a lot of producers spend a lot of time in the vineyards shaping that canopy. And one of the things you want to think about in particular is when you have vines, the exposure on kind of the cooler east side, which sees the morning sun, cooler morning sun, and then the really, really hot west side of the vines that see the hot afternoon sun. So if you want to avoid those TDN notes, you're going to make sure, particularly on that west side, you've got a lot of shading on it. And so that's the thing to think about with TDN. You can't bank on it to always be there in a blind tasting, because there are producers that don't want it. They don't want that cilantro of wine note, because there's some consumers that just don't find it very appealing. So you want to go back to things like that rectangle of flavor with that. Why does Clare Valley Riesling hit all these different clusters? The citrus, the tree, the stone, the tropical. Well, it's the interplay between those warm notes that we talked about, the low latitude, high light intensity, that warm continental climate. They also have some warm soils, and you're thinking like Polish Hill, you got slate soils, there's a lot of sandstone. Watervale's got a little cooler with like limestone soils. There's also the Terra Rosa there. But overall, a lot of warm soils, but there's cooling influences. And this is the magic with Clare Valley. It's got some altitude. It is in the northern part of the Mount Lofty ranges. So you have altitudes of 300 to 500 meters. In fact, in the pick roll for the recap, I included one of the Jim Barry wines from Lodge Hill. And I love on the note there, it kind of describes, Lodge Hill is one of the higher areas in the Clare Valley, 480 meters, I believe. So that altitude helps. It's a continental climate. And so when you see continental, instantly think diurnals. The temperature range from the high of the day versus nighttime when it drops. In continental climates, that is a much wider range, and it helps you preserve acidities because of those cool nights. You don't get those same cool nights in a maritime climate or a Mediterranean climate. So again, you see continental climate as a description of a wine region, think of those diurnals that help preserve some of the acidity. And then the other factor that kind of helps with that as a cooling influence is afternoon breezes going through the ranges there. It's not on the coast, so it's not quite coastal breezes, but it can kind of make its way there in the afternoon to help cool off the vines and preserve that freshness and help give those intensity and that complexity of that range of flavors for Riesling. Structure clues: pale lemon, so not a lot of color with that. Pronounced intensity. This is a big thing. I know some folks went like Hunter Valley Semillon, which is a very good guess, but it's never going to be quite as intense as a Riesling. Bone dry. This is a very distinctive point with, there are some Australian Rieslings that are made with some more residual sugar, but classic benchmark style, bone dry. High acidity, medium bodied, medium alcohol. This is another difference too with Hunter Semillon. Hunter Semillon is always going to be the low alcohol because they intentionally harvest the grapes early on that. In Hunter Valley on the east coast of Australia, not very sheltered from some of those late summer, autumn time storms, so they often harvest early. So low alcohol with Hunter, whereas in the Clare Valley, Eden Valley, medium alcohol is more common. And then the quality level is going to be anywhere from good to outstanding and mid to premium price. So those are our recap for the clues for Clare Valley Riesling. I went ahead and posted today's mystery grape early, so that's up available. And I may have I did name drop the region. Lebanon was where our geeky mystery grape is from. So go check it out and see how you do. Take care.